Hi. So Sixto and I are PhD candidates in the Ecology and Evolution department. And for our dashboard, we've chosen a data set that's very close to our hearts, which is one related to the decline of biodiversity and the urgent need for conservation actions. So to give you some background, the decline of biodiversity represents one of the most critical issues around the globe. Approximately one quarter of species are threatened with extinction, and this is a number that's consistently on the rise. This has made effective conservation strategies more important now than ever, and really central to this challenge is the ability to understand and to communicate the complexities of biodiversity and the risks that species face. The International Union for Conservation of Nature, or the IUCN, has played a pivotal role in documenting and disseminating information on the global decline of species. Utilizing both qualitative and quantitative criteria, such as geographic range and population size over time, the red list assigns species to one of 9 categories according to their risk of extinction and the amount of available data. So our goal is to visualize data from the IUCN red list of threatened species, helping to identify priority areas for conservation. We focused on documenting the total number of species and the total number of critically endangered species found in each country. Species that are critically endangered warrant particular attention due to their high risk of extinction. With limited resources available for conservation efforts, it's more crucial than ever to determine where to focus these efforts. So through our project, we hope to cast a spotlight on the critical conservation needs around the globe. So for our data set, we merged 2 data sets, both from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The first documented the total number of species that have been assessed by the IUCN in various countries across the globe, and the second data set contained the number of critically endangered species documented by IUCN for each of these countries. And we used a mix of standard and non-standard visualizations for our dashboard, including a bar plot, a k-means plot, a PCA biplot, a parallel coordinates plot, and a geomap. So the first of these is the geomap. This figure allows for visualization of the IUCN data in geographical space. Users can pan across the map and hover over different countries to observe the number of species present in each one. We also incorporated a drop-down menu so that you can select which category of species to observe. You can view the total number of species in each country or the total number of critically endangered species, and you can also hone in on specific species groups. So the closer to yellow the country is, the more species are located there. So from this figure, you can see that Australia has the greatest number of species. It's this big biodiversity hotspot. However, if you choose to show critically endangered species, the Czech Republic has the greatest number, which might indicate that this area is a hotspot of biodiversity loss, especially given its smaller size compared to other countries.
Moving on to other visualizations, so we also have a bar plot. As you can see, the bar plot shows the number of species, both total and critically endangered, on the y-axis, and it's differentiated by bar color. So the blue bars are the total number of species, the red bars are the critically endangered species. And then the x-axis has all the different countries that were in the data set. You can change the orientation of the bar plot by clicking on one of the radio buttons. Um, and when it's upright, we decided to log scale the y-axis because the number of critically endangered species was much lower than the total species for all the countries. So without log scaling, it would have been very difficult to visualize the critically endangered values. So the bar plot showed us that Australia, Colombia, and Italy have some of the highest number of species, of total species. But on the other hand, the Czech Republic, Germany, and Japan have some of the highest numbers of critically endangered species. So this could indicate that higher conservation efforts are required in these 3 countries. Moving along, we have the k-means MSE plot. So the k-means, mean squared error plot, shows a relationship between the number of clusters and the corresponding MSE score. So lower MSE scores indicate better cluster cohesion, meaning that data points within each cluster are closer to the centroid. And the purpose of the k-means MSE plot is to help determine the optimal number of clusters for the data set. So by optimal, we mean that we want a number of clusters that will give us a lot of information about our data set and help us group different data points, while also trying to lower the total mean squared error. But you also don't want too many clusters because then that won't really help you determine anything about your data. So we decided that 5 is the optimal number of clusters, but we also allow the user to interact with the k-means plot so that they can select the number of clusters shown on the biplot and the parallel coordinates plot. So as shown, when you click different numbers or different bars on the MSE plot, it shows different numbers of clusters on the parallel coordinates plot and the PCA biplot. So now to talk about the PCA biplot, the axes of the biplot represent the principal components of our data resulting from the PCA, and the biplot displays arrows that represent the loadings of each original variable on the principal components. So the length and direction of the arrows indicate the strength and direction of correlation between the variables in the principal components. So variables that point in the same direction are positively correlated. For example, all lichen species and all mosses look to have a strong positive correlation. But on the other hand, variables that point in opposite directions are negatively correlated. So critically endangered lichens and critically endangered amphibians, since they're pointing in opposite directions, have a strong negative correlation. And then moving along to the parallel coordinates plot. So this shows all of the variables, and in our case, in our data set, it's different animal groups, whether all animals, all mammals, or critically endangered mammals, and so on and so forth. And these variables are represented by vertical axes, which are parallel to each other. Each data point in the data set is represented by a line that connects the values of the variables along the corresponding axes. So each country is a line. And clustering of the parallel coordinates plot shows a large group of countries with a relatively low number of birds, reptiles, and amphibians. So this could indicate that more conservation efforts are required in many countries in this data set for those specific animal groups. And there's also great interactivity with this parallel coordinates plot. The user is able to reorder the axes sort of by moving them along as shown here. And there also is some brushing that can be done. So as the user clicks on a vertical axis and then sort of drags across it, that shows the lines that have values within that range. And any lines that don't have values within that range are grayed out. So you can still see all of the polylines together, but only the lines within a certain range are highlighted. And we were able to conclude through all this data that there are several countries that can be considered biodiversity hotspots or have a lot of species, such as Colombia, Australia, of course. But then there's also many countries that maybe require a little more action on the conservation side of things, such as Germany and Japan. And it'd be interesting to do further future research on those countries and why exactly they show those patterns. And of course, it's just as I just mentioned, there are some animal groups such as birds, reptiles, and amphibians that likely require more conservation efforts to protect them. So thank you.